All right, cool. Well, so Shane, I both a disclosure and I guess a small humble brag.
Yeah.
I had the fortune to back you in 2020, back when Polymarket was just a twinkle, just barely a twinkle in someone's eyes at seed stage, right? And now it's actually something that is cited all around the world. In fact, we were just posting on this other day. Polymarket is the news. And maybe you can talk about that and explain what prediction markets are, what you built, why it's the news.
Yeah, I mean, simply put, when you think about a prediction market, it's the idea that if you let people bet or trade with one another on the outcome of an event, what people are doing is they're pricing the likelihood that something's going to happen. And you can look at the price discovery, the price of, yes, of it happening, as effectively the likelihood or the probability that it'll occur. And you can track it with a chart over time. And if you take all the academia and like the nerd stuff about prediction markets, you just think of it like, hey, it's this percentage likely to happen, and this is how it changes over time. It becomes this really digestible mass market concept that even now we're just starting to begin to see the potential of. So it's exciting that what was once confined to sci-fi books and academia and is now something that's widely applicable and accepted.
So, show of hands here. Who here has a Polymarket account or knows of Polymarket? Okay, more people should. That's pretty good. It's actually not.
Hey, I'll take it.
Yeah. You guys should just check it out because so one of the big wins recently, I think, breakout moment was the Biden prediction, right? Maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah, there was always on Polymarket a considerable chance that Biden was going to drop out. And people said that there is an anti-Biden tilt. But in reality, the murmurs in the group chats was that, hey, there's a significant chance that he goes on there. There's this early debate. There's a significant chance he goes up there, he botches it, and then there's calls for him to drop out. And that's why it's non-zero. Conventional wisdom would have said it's 0% chance. As that first debate happened, and it was almost like the perfect storm for Polymarket, and it seemed like every group chat, every person I'd known was reaching out, and there was this big Wall Street Journal article about the market that everyone's refreshing, and people had said to me like, "Hey, there's two ways this plays out. One is Biden stays in and your site has lost all credibility, and two is you've changed like the course of history, because in these like Dem chats, like people were sharing it and being like, "Hey, Biden has no chance," according to Polymarket. I'm surrounded, as being born and raised in New Yorker, like a lot of people who are really staunchly behind a guy like Biden in terms of their political beliefs. And even until the final day, when they see their guy saying, "Hey, I'm staying in," like, everyone's going and taking that at face value, whereas Polymarket was like, hey, don't be too sure about that. It provided this measured and unbiased public good of being able to just say, hey, when it comes down to people putting their money where their mouth is, it's far from a certainty. If anything, it's more than likely that he does drop out. And that just helped people be more measured and
It's kind of like diving into water, though, because there is resistance. And then it's now completely gone. Nobody's like yelling at you, "Oh my God, you called for Biden." Nobody cares. Like the same people who would have been like really mad like 2 months ago are completely over it and don't care. And actually, they now are like, "Yeah, you guys called it right," and they give you credibility. They have no emotion about it anymore, right?
Absolutely. There is that the trough of disillusionment, right? Like there's the elements of cope, and usually if you just keep your head down for a few days, it dissipates because the truth prevails.
And the thing about that graph in particular, if you guys Google Polymarket as the news, you might see my tweet on this where I paste the graph, and it looks like if the y-axis is 0% Biden runs for re-election, 100% he runs for re-election, it was at like 90 something percent, which was already like 10 points off, and then it kind of went like this. And then one fine day just went jaggedly down like this with a bounce up and down, and then it hit zero, right? And to my mind, that's almost the inverse of the typical startup exponential, right? Because you're flat for a while, and
Yeah.
then it's finally recognized, and you go vertical like this, right? So you're kind of flattish at like, a few percent for a while, and it's recognized, and then it goes down like, right?
Right.
Go ahead.
Well, the cool thing now is with Polymarket, you can almost quantify like an implosion. You
Right.
can look at it, visually, like that graph can go and embody something like that. And what's funny is if you're saying it's the inverse of startup exponential curves, or like an S curve. Now that Polymarket exists, now that it's part of the news, now that it's part of the cycle of something happening and playing out, it'll be interesting to see if that, almost like the Gartner hype cycle too, where it's like if the trend ends up being something that's almost like reusable, where like the sentiment and how people cope and then come to terms with it follows the same arc.
I think that's right. I mean, because the thing is, there's a similar sentiment with lots of startup things where they're ignored. Then there's a period where they're going vertical, where they're resisted, and everybody's yelling. Like, remember how, oh my God, Uber, they were all so mad about Uber like 6-7 years ago, Lyft, ride sharing, whatever. And now it's just a part of life, and there's zero emotion about it or what have you. So it goes from nobody cares because it doesn't work, then everybody's mad because it's working, and nobody cares because it's working, right? That's
spot on.
That's right, right? So, I'm interested in prediction markets for a few things. First is, one of the things we've talked about is I'm not so sure prediction markets predict the future, but at a minimum, they verify the past, which they're like verification markets, right? Because they give a strong incentive to actually, it's like, let's take a horse race, right? If people are betting on a horse race, you don't necessarily know if number 7 or number 3 or whatever is going to win. But you definitely have a record of which horse won the race, and it's digital and it's written down because money's at stake, right? So there's an incentive to keep good records of the past, and that's actually less trivial than people think, to actually write down and get a decision. You've probably seen some contentious who won type bets around,
Yeah.
but maybe you could talk about that.
Well, ultimately, the market's pricing ability is only as good as its resolution criteria, because you can have a question, but at the end of the day, the way it's going to resolve, whether that means it's, if there's the potential of a faulty oracle or something like that is what's being priced, not just the headline question, which I think we, at least to date, the people who are working on that are always continuing to get better at, and they're the best it gets when it comes to writing unambiguous resolution criteria.
What are good examples? What are good and bad examples of resolution criteria for prediction market?
It's funny because the new LLMs actually do an incredible job of auditing it as well as drafting it. I think with O1 you probably get even better with the advanced reasoning capabilities. But
interesting, because they think of all these edge cases and
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, there's this idea of the Arrow de Bro complete markets. Ideally, when you read the resolution criteria, it should be very explicit why it happens, and then if it isn't that, it's the other side. It's a no. But the thing that I find most interesting about Polymarket and prediction markets is people are desperate to just consume information about a current event that they're following, and there may be pushback that like the price at that moment is inaccurate, etc. First of all, if you think it's inaccurate, you can profit, and the more and more these markets become a mainstay, the more and more that's going to be popularized as a way to participate in what's going on in the world. And the way to consume news. But the second thing is just that the market, unlike a stock or a cryptocurrency where it's like the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent, like these markets are not levered, and they very explicitly resolve, and if you're right, you're going to win, if you're wrong, you're not. So the intrinsic value of an outcome token is the probability. And maybe people will, dispute that, but that's the rough maths of it. And What's exciting about that is it puts you in a position where at least the market's best guess is something that anyone can go and reference. And if you think about what is that, how do you benchmark that against some other way of predicting? And it's like, okay, well, either you're going to go look on your newsfeed. If you're on your newsfeed, you're going to be there's infinite user-generated content, and they're going to just serve you whatever it is that's going to keep you engaged. If you lean left, they're going to keep serving you left until you're all the way on that end of the spectrum, and vice versa for if you lean lean right. And or you look at polling and it's like it's this antiquated technology that, again, there's a ton of different flavors, and it's like what plays into your confirmation bias. So at least with Polymarket, there is something that is real time that people can engage in and cite for free. That at least gives someone like a guiding principle or a guiding measure of the right way to think about it. And I think just the amount of adoption of Polymarket as an information source, tens of millions of people, if not more, it seems impossible that we don't one day live in a world where every time anyone's going to make a decision, they're looking at what's Polymarket pricing this at, or what does it say about this? And if you know that something's very likely to happen, all of a sudden you can go better plan for the future. And I think that flywheel of people being able to get more information about the future, make better decisions, have a better outcome, so on and so forth, is awesome.
So, okay, so let's talk about like let's call them criticisms or things to tackle in prediction markets. So one big one is being the question of liquidity, right?
Yeah.
Like, political markets are so large because they're national or international in scale. Everybody's got some familiarity with what's being wagered on and some strong opinions on it, and they want to prove it and so on. So those are the things that sort of get liquidity first. They're like, I don't know, the BTC USD of the space, right? But what are the other order books that, is it just going to be all politics for a while? What are things do you think of? Because I've got some theses, but I'd like to hear yours.
Yeah. If you go down the rabbit hole of Polymarket and you check all the different markets, people again and again are surprised at like the tightness of what people would say long tail markets, as well as just liquidity and the volume. And I think when we think about building this, because people were always like, oh, it's extremely difficult, it's impossible to provide liquidity for these markets. That's not right. It's very difficult, but it's not impossible. And if you tone it back, it's like in ancient Rome, gladiatorial matches, people were making markets on it. So if there is an outcome and there's disagreement, there's a market to be made. So the question for us, in order to go and bootstrap this, and we didn't have endless ammunition to go and just flood incentives to go and bootstrap liquidity. We had to figure out how to do it in a sustainable way, which in hindsight has been really beneficial for us and kind of been the reason why Polymarket is the one thing that works. And it's basically going and creating the supply side tooling that helps people price these things. It's interesting. It's like once you have price discovery, and again, there can be a margin of error. Maybe it's 10 cent wide in terms of like the market's confidence interval and it, what the market price is. And then once you have price, then you can start to focus on growing liquidity. And then once you have price and liquidity, all of a sudden now you can let people go and participate in markets, trade, bet on things that they never would have been able to otherwise, which I think is really exciting. But we had to just get into the nitty gritty of how can you make it just so that it's in the early days you can solve the chicken and egg. In the early stages of a standalone market, you can solve the chicken and egg problem. And there's a ton of technicalities and specifics for it, but I think the secret sauce of what we've been able to do is we got that right. Where if there's an outcome, if there's a probability, there are people who, almost like the Philip Tetlock super forecasters, just think probabilistically, and making it easy for those people to start pricing the market and posting orders is the name of the game.
Let me give some examples of things I think are interesting as prediction markets, and then you tell me if you think they'd be good, bad, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So, kind of the kind of people who are on Polymarket now are crypto/tech or crypto tech/politics people, let's say disproportionately, right? So, for example, you could have a prediction market on will Apple ship a 3-fold phone, right? Or will this GitHub new open source project that everybody thinks is awesome, like what was that NPM replacement bun, right? Okay, well, like just some seemingly obscure thing. Will it get to 20,000 stars on GitHub or whatever? Even that's actually a pretty important, library. But,
yeah.
Right? And of course, there's ways you can game that. People can do fake stars to try to get on top of it, and maybe that's where the O1, the AI can anticipate that. It has to be like 20,000 real stars and real humans, and we run some proof of human over it, and so on, right? So, A, like kind of predicting when products will ship. B, predicting how many stars, likes, replies, all of these social media stats are unambiguous, and you can get time series data out of them. And you can say, the meme economy stuff. Have you seen that?
I like memes.
Yeah. Well, so there's like a subreddit called Meme Economy, and it's sort of
the OG meme economy, like the Pepe stuff.
Yeah, and it's basically saying like when someone sees a new meme that they think is going to do numbers, right? They should immediately go to Polymarket and put down a bet on that.
Yeah.
That it's going to do numbers that essentially this will get millions of views or whatever, right? The problem is right now is often a meme like that, getting the analytics across the entire web is hard, right? But you can imagine siloed versions of it, which is like this YouTube video is going to do numbers, right?
Exactly.
Right? So go ahead.
I mean, ultimately, I think every data feed, there'll be an opportunity to create markets on it, and especially if there's a dispute in terms of opinion, or some people have optimistic views of it, and some people have pessimistic views. I think all those things make sense, and obviously you think about YouTube video, and it's like, okay, someone buys views, right? I think when Polymarket matures and people can ask their own questions, you'll start to see the use case of bounties become a thing.
Right.
Because if it's one-sided, that people can collectively, or one person can go in and go in, like,
people
make
will
something
want to
themselves.
self-fulfilling prophecy. Like there
Yeah.
is a continuum between a prediction market and a bounty, because usually people who care enough to put down a prediction market want one outcome or the other to happen, and are often either they want to make it a reality or they want to hedge against the undesired eventuality that it becomes a reality. That's
Right.
frequent. Maybe not
Yeah,
always, but
I think those are the trading use cases. Like, you're either going to hedge or you have an opinion, and the opinion could either be through analytics and research, or it could be through a hunch.
right.
I think one of the coolest parts of Polymarket that we've seen is, like, there is a lot of criticism about derivatives where it's like, oh, it's zero sum and no one wins, and you're not really creating value. But when you have a fairly small subset of people trading on Polymarket, and then you have maybe even 100 million people who've gotten value from the odds, that's positive sum.
Oh yeah, no.
Well, so it just goes and takes the idea of harnessing people's discrepancies of opinions and derivatives markets, where people are swapping risk to go and answer really difficult, really important questions in a way that everyone can benefit from. So that's the exciting element of the informational component.
Well, there's that saying, price is a signal. And in this case, the price is, in the most literal sense, a signal, because Polymarket substitutes for or even invents data that polls wouldn't capture, right? Like with a poll, some longitudinal poll, as we were talking about, it's quite expensive to go and do a Pew or Gallup poll over time points that's representative across, whereas you will get a, crypto-like 24/7 time series of people's confidence in this matter.
Exactly.
And the audience is basically, or the market is subsidizing it, right? And so that means that you can get much higher resolution data. And how much are they really paying? Basically, it's like a few people, essentially having a zero-sum game with each other, fine. But that seems like the societal benefit of having those kinds of price graphs on many things that were unpriced.
Exactly.
Orders of magnitude beyond however much the zero-sum gain or loss is. Like, for example, the Biden dropout one is, in a sense, trillions of dollars in global markets could flip on, what regulatory decisions are made one way or the other, for example, right?
Totally. I mean, a lot of these, it also, when you think about it like that, it's like, if you quantify the economic impact of some of these big decisions or big geopolitical events, all of a sudden, these markets that may seem kind of toyish, all of a sudden seem a lot more important. Yeah.
Cool.
It's
What comes next?
It's exciting. I think that ultimately, like you have all these ideas. A lot of people have ideas they want to see markets from. Polymarket, as it stands right now, the terminal state is definitely people asking their own questions, and we're excited to figure out how to bring that to market.
Cool. Awesome. Well, one thing that oh gosh, there's one other thing I wanted to say, which is the we mentioned a relationship between prediction markets and bounties, but also between prediction markets and oracles, right? Because that stream of oracle data is often something that's the input to prediction markets. So, but you haven't actually tackled like crypto prices directly. You do more of the political markets and so on. Or am I wrong about that?
I think that's at the end of the day, right? Like, if you think about it from oracle's a funny word, right? In crypto, it means how you go and get real world information, external information on chain. But an oracle is also just symbolic of being able to tell the future. So it's an important word in the Polymarket world. But I think ultimately, if there's a world where people can go to Polymarket and search up anything that's relevant to them or something that's going on in their life, and they can just see the odds and they can see how it's trended over time, and go see the people who have positions, what they're saying, like it's just gonna lead to a more fruitful civilization. That's what we're building.
Cool, awesome, great.
Thanks, everyone.